Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us at the second edition of Cape Town Conversation. If I could request everyone to please settle down, we'll begin in a couple of minutes. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Cape Town. We had many of you join us at the inaugural edition last year, and it's wonderful to have you join us again. And to those of you who've joined us this year, welcome to Cape Town, and welcome to the second edition of Cape Town Conversations. We'll now begin and commence with our dialogue this morning, and I hope you had a nice dinner and a relaxed evening and enjoyed the music as well. Before we invite people to start with the welcome addresses, we will play both the South African national anthem and the anthem of the African Union. If I could request everyone to please rise, and we'll then request the production team to play the anthems as well. Thank you so much. I could request everyone to please take their seats. To commence with the conference this time, may I invite Dr. Sameer Saran, President, ORF, to deliver the welcome remarks.
Thank you, Shubh, and good morning and a very warm welcome to all of you on behalf of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, the Observer Research Foundation. We are delighted that you are joining us for the second edition of the Cape Town Conversations. This year we are really excited because we've been able to bring in close to 300 participants from 61 countries to participate in these proceedings. And this excitement and engagement confirms to us that this is a conversation that is going to become increasingly important, not only in this year when South Africa leads the G20 presidency, but in the days ahead when the Global South will increasingly shape the future of some key domains, sectors, and indeed the world order. We are thrilled that we will be hosting 40 distinct conversations over the next 2 days. And I'm excited that we have gender parity. We have equal number of men and women speaking on these 40 different panels. And I think that's something we promised last year. And we are glad that we've been able to do it in the second edition. So well done to the team at Thabo Mbeki Foundation and to the Observer Research Foundation for putting in that extra effort and bringing in the voices that really matter to the future of the world we seek to build together. Now, this conversation is being hosted in the backdrop of course, as I mentioned, South Africa taking charge of what is clearly the most important multilateral grouping in the world today, the most diverse and most representative grouping in the world today, the G20. And they are following in the footsteps of their partners from the Global South, Indonesia, India, and Brazil. And it would be fair to acknowledge the work done by Indonesia, and the foundations that were managing the T20 in Indonesia are with us at this forum. We must applaud them for keeping the G20 alive. But for the efforts of Indonesia, G20 would not be where it is today. It could have faltered and it could have been a divided house, polarized and fallen victim to the politics of the times. They kept it alive. They added emphasis and focus on development, on digital innovation, on consensus. And I think that was critical, on consensus building in a time when politics was defeating global efforts. India, of course, added some more dimensions and its own flavor to it, the digital public initiative, women-led growth, the reforms of the MDB system, and of course, India truly made it a people's G20, taking it to different cities, towns, and to the streets of India, bringing in the common woman and man into the discussions that were heretofore a very elite conversation. The Brazilians have done a number of very important tasks during their 1 year. I mean, the list is endless and they're going to speak about it, but let me just focus on 3. The Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, I think that's a very credible initiative, and it's important that in this day and age when we have surpluses of food production, we are unable to reach food to those who need it. And I think this alliance is an important effort that they have mobilized. In international taxation cooperation, where tax havens allow the returns that should be delivered to the developing world to remain in the banks of the rich. And I think this Global Tax Alliance or the tax cooperation, international tax cooperation is something that's, whose time had come, and Brazil has brought it to the fore. And of course, a G20 roadmap for MDB reforms. They've taken the agenda forward from Indonesia, India, and they're taking it forward. Now, we are going to hear from South Africa about their plans, and we're going to hear from the team that is working on it, so I don't want to speak about their ambitions. But truly, what can certainly be predicted and can safely be assumed is that South Africa's presidency will be compelling. South Africa has shown in the last year that it can take an international stand, it can mobilize international coalition, and it can make decisions work in favor of issues that are fair and ethical. And we expect South Africa's presidency to be, in some sense, the icing of the cake of the string of Global South presidencies of the G20. So the Cape Town conversation is a moment when many of you who have joined us here can share your thoughts and your perspectives. And we will collect them and collate them and produce them and share them with the leadership of South Africa for them to consider as they take on the mantle of the G20 presidency and architect what will truly be a memorable G20 presidency. So without further ado, let me again welcome you warmly to Cape Town, to the Cape Town Conversations, and thank each one of you for having made the long journey to be with us here and for giving us 2.5 days of your life. So I hope you have a wonderful time here. I hope you make friends. I hope you become part of the Cape Town community, and we hope that this community grows in the days to come. Let me thank our host, South Africa. Let me acknowledge President Thabo Mbeki. Let me acknowledge Speaker of the House, Thoko Didisa. Let me acknowledge all the other dignitaries, Prime Minister Musa Mara and others who have come here and joined us, and others who will be joining in later this evening. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your guidance, and may the conversations begin. Thank you for joining us.
May I now invite the Honorable Thoko Didiza, Trustee, the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, to address us this morning.
Thank you very much, Program Director. President Thabo Mbeki, former President of South Africa and patron of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation. Tony Abbott, former Prime Minister of Australia. Musa Mara, former Prime Minister of Mali. Anand Sharma, former Minister of Commerce and Industry in India. Sanjoy Joshi, Chairman Observer Research Foundation, India, which is commonly known as ORF. Max Bokwana, Chief Executive Officer of Thabo Mbeki Foundation, South Africa. Mr. Jeff Radebe, former Minister in the Republic of South Africa, who has held many portfolios, the first one having been the Minister of Public Works. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, without you, we wouldn't be here in Cape Town for the second time. And I must say that as much as I'm speaking on behalf of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, I'm also the Speaker of the National Assembly of the Parliament of South Africa. And it is indeed a pleasure for me to welcome you in Cape Town, where in the coming year, we will be hosting the P20 here in Cape Town. And I'm sure the conversations you'll be having today will enrich also that dialogue as to how the public representatives will be able to actually ensure that the direction that the G20 takes indeed is conscious of the majority, the concerns rather, of the majority of the people of the Global South. And I think it is important that some of you who may be here who may not know much about Thabo Mbeki Foundation other than reading about it in the social media or in its website, maybe I must do a little bit of marketing of this foundation, not only because the patron is here, our former president, but also because of the work that the foundation does, which I think has been able to mobilize many important partners in ensuring that it uses its power of convening in order to be able to mobilize many of you who are here today to participate in the agenda that shapes not only South Africa's agenda, but also Africa and the global agenda too. Thabo Mbeki Foundation was established in 2010 with a vision to develop programs that address the challenges facing the African continent and to work collaboratively with like-minded organizations and individuals committed to the renewal of Africa. At the launch of the foundation in 2010, our patron, President Mbeki, stated, I quote, "The fundamental proposition from which we proceed is that the transformation which Africa requires, that our continent prepares the necessary human capital, the brain workers who should both conceptualize such transformation and participate in its implementation. Immanent in this proposition is the assertion that human capital should indeed be African, and therefore that to achieve our goals, we must rely decisively on African minds," close quote. This assertion by our patron, underscores the importance of education and the development of necessary skills to drive Africa's transformation. From its inception, the foundation inspired renewed aspiration for Africa's renewal in the hearts and minds of many people. During the same launch, the Thabo Mbeki African Leadership Institute, a flagship program of the foundation in partnership with the University of South Africa, was also unveiled. The mandate of Timali was to develop a cadre of thought leaders committed to Africa's renewal. After 8 years of consistent output with more than 3,000 graduates from the Leadership Institute and through popular demand, Timali has now been upgraded to a graduate school called the Thabo Mbeki Africa School of Public and International Affairs. The Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs is envisioned as a premier candidate school to advance public sector education in public and in international affairs. It also seeks to be a magnet of excellence in education, experiential learning, and research. At the launch of the TM school in September 2010, our patron said the purpose of education was to learn to question everything, and that our aim in teaching should be to produce men and women who are both critical and creative, close quote. In this respect, he emphasized our students should be encouraged to be thinkers and doers rather than accumulators of facts and receivers of knowledge. This must be so if they are to be instruments of change, working towards the realization of a just and consequently a stable society. The TM School Bouquet of Learning offerings, primarily the master's and doctoral qualifications, have been developed with the political, economic, social, and cultural renewal of Africa in mind. They are aimed at training public servants, academics, diplomats, leaders in business, civil society, NGOs, and communities, and lifelong learners to adopt the transdisciplinary approach to solving complex problems in Africa and beyond. In doing so, they contribute to creating a culture of excellence in public service and international affairs arena. I do hope that among these constituencies, the public representatives, who are the ones that shape our laws and hold our governments to account, will also be part of this collective. For too long, the history of our continent has been told through the lens of colonialism and apartheid, erasing the contributions and struggles of our people. The Thabo Mbeki Presidential Center seeks to rectify this by showcasing the diversity, resilience, and creativity of our people. The Presidential Library, scheduled to be opened in 2027, and I'm sure most of you will contribute, if you have not contributed already, to make sure that that library indeed comes into reality. We'll use the archives of historical and contemporary leaders to provide a forum for Africans to better understand and treasure the past, enrich the present, and meet the challenges of the future. It is my hope that the programming and exhibition of the center will inspire future generations to embrace our shared history and work towards a brighter future for all. This history, as much as may be African history, but is a history that connects the Africa's people with the world. It is a history that would also showcase the trade routes that Africa from long before had held with the world, particularly the East. That is why in countries such as in India, you will still find some of the people who look like me with short hair, some of whom still speak their indigenous languages, that India is still trying to decode what it says. We believe that Africa stands as a pivotal juncture in history. With our rich resources, youthful populations, and most of whom who are here, and increasing influence on the global stage, we have the tools necessary to shape our destiny. However, this requires a concerted effort to harness our strengths, address our weaknesses, and work collaboratively towards common goals. Central to this vision is the principle of South-South cooperation. The challenges faced by countries in the Global South are often similar, be it in economic development, technological advancement, or social inclusion. By fostering ties among ourselves, we can share experiences, pool resources, and develop homegrown solutions that are tailored to our unique context. South-South cooperation is not merely an alternative to traditional North-South dynamics. It is a complement that enriches the global discourse. It allows us to present new perspectives, challenge existing paradigms, and contribute to a more balanced, inclusive international system. We can actually reflect on this when we trace what has been the thematic issues that have been dealt with by the G20, starting from Indonesia, India, and Brazil. In an increasingly interconnected and multipolar world, multilateralism remains a vital mechanism for addressing global challenges. The Thabo Mbeki Foundation firmly believes that through multilateral engagements, we can amplify the voices of the Global South, ensuring that our interests and concerns are adequately represented on the world stage. The Cape Town conversation, which we are in here again for the second time, exemplifies this commitment. By bringing together diverse stakeholders from senior government officials to thought leaders and innovators, we aim to facilitate dialogues that transcend borders and disciplines. It is through such inclusive discussions that we can develop actionable strategies to reform global governance structures, making them more reflective of the 21st century realities. As we look ahead, the importance of advancing the Global South agenda cannot be overstated. The year 2024 has represented us with numerous challenges, from geopolitical conflicts affecting supply chains of the pressing need for sustainable development amidst climate change. Yet amidst these difficulties, the Global South continues to be a beacon of hope, a region of steady economic growth, innovation, and resilient communities. I'm happy that as these conversations are continuing here in Cape Town, the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, is also having the dialogue in Johannesburg, where it is reflecting amongst their constituencies who represent about 200 participants coming from UNDP country representatives. And I'm happy that the head of South Africa UNDP country office is amongst us here today. It's also reflecting on how the UNDP can work with countries, their governments, their civil society, to be able to contribute in shaping the development agenda of those countries. They're looking at their future and how they must act. With South Africa set to assume the G20 presidency in 2025, we have a unique opportunity to influence global policies in favor of solidarity, equality, and sustainability. The Thabo Mbeki Foundation is committed to leveraging this moment to future the goals of African Renaissance and to ensure that the aspirations of the Global South are not only heard but acted upon. We encourage all participants over the next 3 days to engage earnestly in the discussion, workshops, and networking opportunities that the Cape Town Conversation offers. Your insights, expertise, and collaboration are essential in driving forward the initiatives that will shape our collective future. Let us use this forum to challenge conventional thinking, to propose innovative solutions, and to build partnerships that extend beyond these conference walls. Together, we can transform the dialogues of today into the actions of the future. In closing, I would like to reiterate the Thabo Mbeki Foundation's dedication to making the Cape Town Conversations an enduring annual event and a cornerstone that continuously advances the Global South agenda through the spirit of multilateralism. We're committed to working alongside all of you to realize the vision of a renewed and prosperous Africa within a just and equitable world order. I want to say, in finishing your 3 days of engagement, surely you will be tired. You will need some break. You will need to see the seaside and see some mountains of Cape Town. So you can extend your booking for another day in a hotel and just take a ride to see the Hermanas. Sorry you didn't come in September. You've missed the whales. But you'll still see some sea creatures that will be of interest to you. If not, you can dip in the waters of the Indian Ocean and enjoy being at home, away from home. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to the fruitful exchanges that await us.
Thank you so much, the Honorable Thoko Didiza. May I now invite Excellency Prabhat Kumar, High Commissioner of India to South Africa, to address all of you. So.
Good morning, Sani Bonani, Dumelang, former President Thabo Mbeki, Speaker Didiza, our former Minister of Commerce and Minister of External Affairs, Anand Sharma, Ambassador Lata Reddy, former ministers, MPs. I do not have the list, so I will go by the local convention, all protocols observed. I am very happy to be here today to join you for this second edition of Cape Town Conversation. I was not able to come last year because of other engagements, but I think last year the BRICS was there and there were some other meetings in Pretoria and Johannesburg. So I came to South Africa in August last year, just before the BRICS meeting, and I have been here for 1 year. And I see the relevance of the Cape Town Conversation, which brings together the think tanks of the world and to Africa, to South Africa, and just on the eve of of South Africa taking over the presidency of G20. I recall that when we took over the presidency of G20 in 2022 December, our Prime Minister wrote, Prime Minister Narendra Modi wrote that we must take the views of the Global South when we have our presidency. And in that context, we held two actually in 2023, Voice of Global South summits. It was virtual, in which there was participation from the Global South countries. In the first summit, there were 125 participants, including from many countries, including South Africa. And we saw, and from those conversations that Prime Minister had in those virtual summits, we were able to glean what the Global South required. And just after the summit, we had another conversation, the second Voice of Global South Summit in 2023 in October, in which again we took the views. And this year also, in September, we had another edition of Voice of Global South Summit. So the idea was to take the view of the Global South and make it part of the global conversation, as centerpiece of the global conversation. And that is what is happening now, and I hope that this Cape Town Conversation will work on it. So from our presidency, we got, of course, apart from the Voice of Global South Summit, we had African Union becoming a member of G20, and seeing that Indonesia, India, and Brazil, and now South Africa, 4 countries in a row from the Global South have taken the presidency of G20, and that means that the agenda of Global South will remain the central agenda during the presidency of G20 of South Africa, and this also we have been assured from the government of South Africa. So that's a good development. We also continue to work with South Africa on many other forums, including BRICS, IPSA, and we had an IPSA exercise recently in Cape Town in October, the first half of October, in which India, Brazil, and navies of India, Brazil, and South Africa participated. So IPSA also continues to be strong, and the three democracies of the world work together in this forum on many aspects. We see that there is a Africa free continental area developing, and there is a lot of progress in the Africa free continental free trade area, and as it progresses, India is also working with them to become part of this free trade area and to become part of the development of the Africa Free Trade Area. I will be participating in this forum today. Tomorrow we are having a conference on energy in Johannesburg, in which there is participation from a lot of Indian companies, the big companies of India, we call them Maharatna and Navratnas, and also from the companies of South Africa and other African countries. We will have the Minister of Electricity of South Africa participating, and also virtual participation from our Minister of Power. So this is a good occasion when we are talking about energy. We will have a conversation on energy, which is critical for development of the Global South. I think Africa will be a pivot on which the new energy transition will happen, because Africa has the capability and capacity to support that, especially in the field of critical minerals. And most of the critical minerals which are going to be part of the energy transition is available in Africa. So also the new energy, such as green hydrogen, will be coming from Africa, apart from other countries like India. But therefore, this will be a good conversation that we'll be having in Johannesburg. But for today, I would like to thank, of course, Observer Research Foundation, Thabo Mbeki Foundation, and others who are participating and have brought together the think tanks of the world. And I think, Speaker, I promise you that we will publicize the work of Thabo Mbeki Foundation and make it. Of course, the High Commission will be happy to work with you, and of course, India will be happy to work with you in future. So, thank you very much for inviting me for this event, and I wish it all success. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. It is now my honor and privilege to invite the Honorable Thabo Mbeki, former President of South Africa, to address all of you this morning. Sir. Thank you for having us back, sir. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Good morning, everybody. I hope we are all okay. It says on my notes here, which I got from the organizers, it says I'm going to deliver an inaugural address. It's wrong. I'm not going to do that. But let me say, I really am, I want to join Samir Saran, Tawat Idiza, the High Commissioner of India, to welcome all of you here. Let me tell you something about this hotel. You know, I was in exile for 28 years, from 1962, and came back 1990. So, to begin the negotiations with the apartheid regime. So we flew out of Lusaka, Zambia, to Cape Town, this airport here. And you know, as we came, I'm saying this is after 28 years of absence. So as we flew from Lusaka to Cape Town, it was an ordinary flight. Except when we flew over South Africa, the pilots were South African, but they flew a Zambia Airways plane. So they were telling us, now we're flying over Johannesburg, we're flying over Kimberley, we're flying over wherever. Beyond that, it felt very, very ordinary. Like a flight, I suppose, between Mumbai or Delhi and so on. And what struck me was why it had taken so long to take an ordinary flight after so many people had died, but the thing seemed so easy to come home to talk to the enemy. So we landed at Cape Town, and we, of course, naturally, our hosts were the apartheid regime. And so they drove us straight to this hotel. So my first home after coming back home after 28 was this hotel, the Lord Charles. And we're meeting here, the Lord Charles, in order to bring an end to 350 years of colonial rule. As I said, a simple flight from Lusaka to Cape Town, and a simple drive from Cape Town airport to here, but to do a major, major job. To sit down with the apartheid regime to say, how do we end apartheid and how do we end colonial rule? I'm mentioning that because we are meeting here today and tomorrow, in my view, to do a very, very important thing. To say to ourselves, what are the challenges of the Global South? What are the aspirations of the Global South? And how are those aspirations to be achieved? I think the point that was made by Samir Saran is important, and Togo, that South Africa takes over the presidency of the G20, and it must raise, as president of the G20, like Brazil, like India, like Indonesia, must raise this question. What are the challenges of the Global South? What are the aspirations of the Global South? And how are those aspirations to be addressed? Bearing in mind in particular that we are operating, that Global South is operating within the context of this global world, which has got these other people within this global world who do not necessarily share the interests and aspirations of the Global South. I happen to chair the board of the South Center. based, as you know, everybody knows here would know, based in Geneva. Its only task is to serve as a think tank of the developing countries. And every day, you find these ambassadors of the South, every day engaged in a constant battle, whether it's WTO, WHO, whatever, in Geneva. Yeah, it's a constant struggle. To address this matter, how are the aspirations of the Global South going to be addressed? And so I'm saying that as we meet here over these 2 days, considering these matters, my view is that we will indeed approach all of these questions that we've got to discuss. The South African-led multilateralism. I noticed that in one of the plenary sessions we discussed that. South-led multilateralism, issues of trade and investment in a new world system, paths to peace, all of these matters. So that indeed, as South Africa takes over the presidency of the G20 following all these other countries of the South, there must be a message from us here, which says in continuation of what has been happening in terms of this G20 meetings, this is what we want to achieve. This is what the G20, the Global South wants to achieve, and this is how it should be done. Of course, we know very well that these important matters that the Global South raises, it raises them in the context of, there are many other issues around the world which take other people's attention away from what we think are very urgent matters. But that's a setting, we can't do anything about that. So I am really hoping, therefore, that we will all attend to this, I think it's 16 plenary sessions, to discuss these various topics, which are each one of them very important in terms of defining what is this thing that we want and how should it be achieved. So that becomes the global agenda of the Global South, which is a matter then which must be pursued not only through the G20, but in also other fora. Even in this one I'm talking about, so that even our colleagues who sit in Switzerland, in the South Center, need to be informed. This is our approach towards these issues of the Global South. So as you are negotiating every day with the rest of the world, this is what we think. So I want to say a warm welcome to this meeting. And I had a bit of a chat with the organizers yesterday to say that I really hope that when we conclude tomorrow, there will be somebody who will be able to say, from all of the discussions that we've had over these 2 days, this seems to be some of what we are saying. With regard to the question, what is to be done? I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that because we must aim, coming here and sitting at this hotel, which has got a strange name, the Lord Charles. Lord Charles is talking, this Charles is talking about, is Charles Somerset, a British colonial governor, but we still, we honor them still. Quite why, I don't know, but we do. I'm saying that when we come out of here, in the same way as when we arrived, we came back here in 1990, we're saying that we must make absolutely certain that by the time we conclude all of this discussion with this enemy of ours, we must decide on a changed South Africa. And I really hope that by the time we conclude here discussing these matters of the Global South and what it needs, we'll also be able to say, we come out of here with a message which truly, truly points the way as to how to address these aspirations of the Global South within the context of an international system which is not necessarily that friendly to addressing the aspirations of the Global South. But a warm welcome to everybody. As I was saying that I wasn't going to make any inaugural address, but a warm welcome and good luck in the work that you have to do, which is very, very important. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. It's always an honor to hear from you and of your vast experience and, of course, about the history of this hotel, and who better to tell it than President Mbeki himself. May I now invite Mr. Sanjay Joshi, Chairman at the Observer Research Foundation, to deliver the vote of thanks for this segment, sir.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much, Shubh. President Thabo Mbeki, President of the Foundation of the same name, Toko Jija, Speaker of the National Assembly and Trustee of the Mbeki Foundation, who started as our partners to put these conversations into place and have today become friends and colleagues. The Cape Town conversations would not have been possible without you. And we are all here, there's energy in this room, people gathered from the continents all over, you can feel the energy, are basically here because they look ahead to a future in a world which is not as troubled as what it seems to be today. We live in extremely uncertain times, and these are times when information itself is a weapon. It's like a guided missile targeted at the very foundations of trust and belief between nations to reduce any understanding or comprehension of the world we live in to immediate rubble and dust. This is the kind of world we're living in. Now, where we come from, where the Cape Town conversations are taking place, we exist in a situation where the amount of information we have on a subject has become inversely proportional, exactly inversely proportional to our understanding of the situation. So how do we get clarity to many of these issues? And the inaugural addresses which we heard, so many excellent addresses, were all about getting to this understanding, getting the people in this room gathered from all over, our experts, our young minds, our mentors who are here in this room, to lead us into the way forward. So thank you, all of you, for being here. I mean, our minds are not really captive yet. They've not been captured yet. But yes, they have been rendered like refugees, without anchor, looking for some bearing, looking for some direction as to where to go. And in the same, we heard about the role of the G20 and the various multilateral fora. They show that multilateralism is not dead. Multilateralism is certainly at a crossroads, but it is not dead yet. We saw the progress of the G20. We heard about how it has moved from Indonesia, which salvaged a dying G20, which almost got torn apart over the divisions within the G20. We heard about what India has done within the G20, convert it to a people's G20, more than a people's G20, to make it into the voice of the Global South, to get the African Union into the G20 as a member. And then it passes on to Brazil. And Brazil, very clearly, in another very extremely troubled time, makes it very clear that this is not about the wars being fought in various places. The real wars are against hunger and poverty. The real wars are about shaping the powers of technology, not to use it as a weapon, but to use it as a public good for the good of the last man on the ground. That is what is the purpose of technology. So these are all initiatives which have been coming forward. And where are they coming forward from? No, the various organizations, the various countries where these debates and discussions are taking place today are all in the Global South. So this is the lead which we've taken. Consultative, consensual diplomacy has for some years been taking a back seat within established multilateral institutions. And we've seen it happen, you see. Whether it is at the International Court of Justice, whether it is at the Security Council, whether it is at COP29, which just concluded. So where does one turn if one has to look at the future for some glimmer of hope as to where we are headed? And that is where the world is turning with the country of the Global South into alternative forms of plurilateral groupings. That is precisely what we are seeing. So I don't have much to say at this juncture because all these conversations are actually going to be about some of these key issues over the next few days. And just last week, as we've heard, South Africa assumed the presidency of the G20, putting itself at the helm of similar multilateral efforts at a time when global multilateralism is at the crossroads. This is not just about the Global South. This is about reinventing, reforming the way countries are going to be interacting with each other once again. So, in this context, it is not just the G20. You see, the initiatives launched by the Economic Commission for Africa to push digital governance, to push trade, to push investments. The resolve of India and China to come together at Kazan at the BRICS Summit. To say, okay, let us park our differences. Let us give diplomacy a chance. Let us look forward. We are here to fare forward, not to look back. See, we all have extremely contingent histories. We have a common history of colonialism. Every other nation has lots of histories to complain about. But histories cannot be used to divide us. They cannot be used to rebuild an iron curtain, or for that matter, a bamboo curtain in a new world. We've left that all behind. So faring forward is primarily what the Global South is about, what these conversations are about, and what all of us here are assembled in the Cape Town conversations for. So the future is not about gazing back at what has happened. No, those cannot furnish the logic for dividing the world into them and us, canceling people, not allowing them to participate, not having conversations when they're there. It is about having conversations, getting everybody in the room. And countries in the Global South today are showing that that is still possible. And that is going to be the future moving ahead. So all I will say is that these are the kinds of discussions. What matters for the Global South, as has been made very clear in the past few addresses we've had, is about including everybody. It is about social inclusion. It is about eradicating hunger. It is about saving the planet. That is where the real war is. It is not about what is happening in Ukraine. It is not about what is happening in Gaza. Those things, reprehensible as they are, and as South Africa has shown, they need to be condemned where they are. We are here, if you talk of a rules-based international order, we judge people alike, whether they are friends or foes. It does not matter. The actions are judged, not the people. And we have to be prepared to judge those actions. So this is what a rules-based international order is all about. So these are, I'm sure, going to be some of the discussions which are going to be part of these conversations. And for this, I especially thank all our partners who have been here, excellencies, dignitaries who have come here to be joining us for part of these conversations. Thank you, and let the next 2 days begin.
Thank you, Mr. Joshi. May I now invite the first panel on stage. We will be discussing Order from Chaos, the model for South-led multilateralism, moderated by Samir Saran, President of the Observer Research Foundation. On the panel would be Mr. Anand Sharma, the former Minister of Commerce and Industry from India, Maria Elena Aguera, Secretary General of the Club de Madrid, Moussa Mara, former Prime Minister of Mali, Toko Didiza, the Speaker of the National Assembly in South Africa, and Carolina Chimoy, journalist at Deutsche Welle. If I could invite the speakers on stage, and my colleagues will help you to your seats.
Don't feel shy. Please join me.
Please, yes.
Yeah, just wherever you want to sit. Madam, where you want to come? Please. Come. Please sit in the center.
I'll just...
Good morning. Am I audible? Okay, great. So we are going to actually take forward the conversation that were ignited in the inaugural addresses. South-led multilateral order. What is it that we bring to the table? How do we respond to the failing of certain institutions, financial institutions, trade institutions? The climate ambitions that you saw were rather modest at the COP29 most recently, where the developing worlds have actually complained about the lack of commitments made by the rich countries, but also the failure of the peace and security pillar of the United Nations and the inability of international institutions to maintain peace and stability. I think that's the big question. And we're going to discuss this in the next 40-odd minutes or 45 minutes with a fantastic bunch of leaders, thinkers, and speakers who will share with us their thoughts on how can we revive and reform the political institutions, the financial institutions, the development institutions that serve the largest number of people. The whole idea of a liberal order, was it a chimera? Does it exist? Does it need to be reimagined and redefined? And of course, in the backdrop of this whole new discourse emanating from Western capitals about a new Cold War and the G2 world and the US-China competition, etc. And how does the South and how do colleagues in the North who are joining this panel visualize some of these big questions? So let me start with your permission with Prime Minister Musawara. Let me start with you, sir. Sitting where you are, and we had a chat with you last year. It's been a year since for the second edition. How do you visualize this world of today? What is our role in it? And have we moved the needle? Have we progressed, or has there been a step back?
Thank you, Samir. Hello, everyone. I would like to first thank the organizer of this important meeting, and especially the President, Thabo Mbeki here. The President did a very good thing for our country in 2003, 2004, and especially for Timbuktu, alongside his vision about African Renaissance. And I would like to start by thanking him for all things done during his term. I come from the western part of Africa, Mali precisely. And from this part of Africa, we are concerned by how to deal with the global issues and precisely to think concretely. The most important word is being concrete, doing think, achieving goals. And about the global south, my first question would be, what is really the global south? And all of us from Africa, Latin America, South America, Asia, we have to seriously think about what we will put in the concept of global south. To fix what it could be politically, diplomatically, even ideologically, and to retain some specific goals which could be achieved by the global south as area, as regions. And on this way, I would like maybe to propose some specific goals to the Global South countries, regions. The first is climate, for sure, climate. In this way, how the countries from this Global South could put together their strength, their will, to achieve some specific goals on the climate issue. This is the first. The second is financing the development. How we'll raise money, financial means, to help countries and a region like Africa to get infrastructure, enough infrastructure, energy, give job to youth, how we could leverage the opportunities around the world as a South to get this job done. This is the second. And the third is the UN reform. Mm-hmm. We have been talking about this issue the last 40 years, mm-hmm, with nearly zero result. How, as a global South countries, we can put together our means to get the reform of the United Nations done, especially the reform of the Security Council, and especially giving the permanent seat to the Global South countries. How we can do that? I think we have to work on it, to gather our strength, and to retain a very specific and a very concrete way to get this different goal achieved. That will make Global South really leading the multilateral world we are faced.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I'm tempted to come to the speaker right after you, but I thought I'll probably first go to Minister Anand Sharma. I'll bring you in, sir. You were, of course, the former Minister for Commerce, an architect of most of the trade conversations that took place for the longest period, most important ones. Also someone who has, in the External Affairs Ministry, revived and resuscitated India-Africa ties a couple of decades ago. And someone who's been following the big global questions for a while now. He has laid out an agenda for you, sir. We need more money for climate action, we need more money for development, and we need to reform the UN. In your view, how likely is it? Or does the Global South now need to think up of some new ways of progressing their agenda in the backdrop of failing global institutions?
Thank you, Samir. At the outset, I would like to thank you and the Thabo Mbeki Foundation for having convened these conversations, this meeting, on the eve of the transfer of G20 presidency from Brazil to South Africa. And our best wishes to South Africa, this government and the people. It's also significant, as you had mentioned, that 4 in a row, beginning from Indonesia, India, Brazil, and now South Africa, the Global South is reasserting, raising its voice on issues which have been discussed, debated, many declarations made, but words have remained where they were. If my mind takes me back to the Millennium Summit, the Glen Eagles. At that time, these were the Millennium Developmental Goals. Please read that document. Read the latest document. All the declarations of the last 24 years. Have we reached anywhere? The answer is a firm no. Even the Rio Declaration of G20 says that. And what? That the goals, SDGs, which should have been met, should be completed by 2030. So we don't have 6 years, but 5 years now. Only 17% of the goals targets have been achieved. Baku on climate change, as former Prime Minister Mara was saying, but Baku has been a disappointment. What is the commitment coming? At Glen Eagles, the commitment was 1% of the GDP of the rich countries. Has it come? No. At Baku, 250 billion. The other day I was told in Johannesburg, 150 billion of that is coming from debt servicing of the poor and developing countries. So where is the commitment? The real challenge is if we want to achieve, countries of the South today have a voice, have strength. 80% of the world's population, 50% of the world's GDP, that is the global South. Unless and until the global South finds its rightful place in the organizations, I'm talking of multilateralism, which are mandated to take decisions and uphold the rule-based international order, nothing is going to come out, because we cannot ignore social and economic challenges, with the hunger, poverty, inequality between nations, among the nations, within the societies, communities. But equally important is the wars raging. Wars are being reignited. Old wounds have reopened, old fault lines. There are many unsettled issues. We are talking of Ukraine and Russia. We're talking of what's happening in Middle East, the kind of humanitarian catastrophe that is taking place in Gaza. Where is multilateralism? I have carefully gone through all the declarations and the UN resolutions. The same leaders who actually can stop it are condemning it, are talking of the two-nation solution of creation of viable state of Palestine within secure borders. And unfortunately, those who have dominated the multilateral order are today not showing any commitment to sustain it. I'm sorry to say, if that was the case, why parties which are at war are not being nudged to the negotiating table? Secondly, those who are expected to adhere to a rule-based international order are either in tacit collusion or endorsing the parties which are at war, signing a declaration, but also signing orders for weapons, not for money for climate change, not the transfer of technology, not effective time-bound agenda for mitigation. So what I have to say, unless and until the global South makes it very clear to the entire world, because we are in an interconnected world, interdependent, connected by technology. If anything happens in one part of the world, all of us are equally affected. We have seen during COVID time, we have seen during these wars. I'll only say one message, as President Mbeki had said, should go about the reforms in the multilateral institutions. We should be led, as you have rightly chosen this theme, global South-led. We can do it. Asia, Africa are at an inflection point of history. We will have a defining influence. The message should be, you cannot decide about us without us. We have to be there where decisions are made. Urgent UN reforms to reflect contemporary global realities, a world order that is equitable, fair, and just.
Thank you.
That's what I have to say, unless and until we take that forward, because the G20 declaration has also said it. Another hope has come from the BRICS Plus meeting. And we have also to see why the G20 came into being and why the BRICS Plus and what we can achieve.
Madam Speaker, let me turn to you now. In many ways, your colleagues have pinned all their hopes on your presidency of the G20.
No, true. Thank you very much. Just taking on what has been said, but also in the inaugural inputs that have been made, I think for me, one important thing is for the Global South to remain consistent, not to tire, to hold those who are still refusing to actually abide by the multilateral institutions, to abide by the instruments that all of us have achieved. And I think if one looks at what South Africa did in actually, on the matter of Gaza, taking Israel to the ICC, was, in my view, utilizing the instruments that collectively we have agreed and actually testing whether the commitment we've made in building these institutions and developing the particular instruments and frameworks, can it work? But it was not just about testing, but it was indeed standing in solidarity with those who are oppressed and marginalized. And we saw the participation of other members in the Global South who actually joined in that effort. We might say we're not yet there, but we've actually seen the results, that it is possible. And for me, as members of the Global South, it is important to stay the course on issues that we've been raising about the reform of the UN institution, ensuring that there is inclusion of the majority of the voices of the world who are in the Global South. But at the same time, I would say having alternatives that can show that it is possible to have a different world than we have today. I think the formation of IPSA, the BRICS, has been, in my view, one of those alternatives of saying we can build a better world, which can actually have shared values about our collective development, which can address the issues that are common for us, not only in the South, but also in the North. If you look at the issue of climate change, it's not just affecting the Global South, but the entire community of the world. And I think we need to stay the course in actually calling for accountability from those who have not seen the light as yet, even though their communities are already adversely impacted upon.
Madam Speaker, there's a report from the UN itself in one of its archives, now archives, but at that time it was more contemporary, that less than 3%, if you remove China, less than 3% of climate finance has been invested in developing countries, less than 3%.
True.
And the maximum possible mitigation that can be achieved will only happen if it is the developing countries that embrace green transitions. There is a mismatch between deployment of capital and climate ambitions that the world has signed on to in Paris.
True. You know, if you look at what happened, for instance, at the beginning of the Ukraine-Russia war, the solidarity amongst the countries of the Global South, what India did in ensuring that their stock holding on grains can actually be utilized on those countries, particularly in the South and in Africa in particular, who were actually affected by the disruption of those global chain when it came to agriculture, in my view, was one of the ways in which the Global South can also work in solidarity with each other in addressing the common challenges.
And with the new development bank and the AIIB and new
Exactly.
instruments, you have possibilities of creating your own financial flows, right?
We do have the possibilities of actually creating new financial flows, in my view, and that has been proven. But also to address, without much conditionalities, because there will always be conditionalities, but in a manner in which the NDB, for instance, has sought to address the challenges of those countries who require capital. The conditionalities has not been so onerous that makes it, impossible for the countries to access the much needed financial assistance that they require for their own development.
And we must acknowledge, and for those who are joining us this year, we must, just for your information, it was at the South African presidency last year that BRICS expanded, and now is it in its new avatar, which gives it more capabilities of building some of these and ramping up some of these financial institutions for purposes. So I think kudos to South Africa for leading that, and therefore we are counting on South Africa's G20 presidency to deliver some results. Let me turn to, and Maria, I'm going to come to you. You, like me, you, like me, are someone who runs an institution who watches and hears voices, and I'm going to come to you for your take. And it's going to be ear sweep, the year gone by and your views of that. But let me first turn to Latin America and my colleague Carolina Chimoy, journalist with Deutsche Welle, but someone who is deeply linked to Latin America geography I want to bring in for obvious reasons and its importance. From where you sit and from the work you've been doing, multilateralism and the global south, and that's a big question here. Do you believe the global south can lead? Do you think there is now enough evidence, Indonesian presidency, Indian presidency, Brazilian presidency, and South Africa's remarkable leadership in the last couple of years? Do you believe that the time for global south has come?
I think, Samir, it's probably a momentum for the global south, indeed, but not only because it's what I think. It's important, and the minister already mentioned it, to take a look at the numbers. If we see the BRICS as the leading nations of the global south, economically they represent 36% of the global GDP. 45% of the global population comes from the BRICS, and it's only growing. So this is like the financial, the number parts, but then also the political part, the diplomatic part. The BRICS, I don't think we should see them as countries or as a group who would be stepping in instead of the Western allies, but in a different shape. Like, for example, as a bridge between North and South, as a group of countries who understand both sides and who can support to have a dialogue between both sides. Because of historical reasons, but also because of the financial reasons and the power that the BRICS are getting increasingly. And that could, of course, lead to a multilateral system where the BRICS would have a crucial role.
No, I want to ask you two questions. Since I'm on Latin America, let me ask you two questions. One is, of course, as Madam Speaker mentioned, the Russia-Ukraine question and the Latin American view on that. We saw there was in many ways, a kind of similar view across most of the countries across this continent where we are sitting and in many parts of where I come from. What is the LATAM view? And of course, let me also ask you the question about this G2 world, the new Cold War as people talk about. What is China up to in Latin America? What is the Chinese presence? What does it do to the American influence in the region? What's happening there?
Okay, starting with very different questions, by the way.
I know.
Starting with Ukraine, Latin America, most of the countries there want to maintain their neutrality. They don't want to be too involved in this war, in this conflict. And I like to put things down to specific examples. And in this case, I would like to pick up the example of Brazil. As you know, that was 2023, after 1 year of the war in Ukraine, and Chancellor Scholz went to Brazil for a meeting with Lula da Silva and asked him explicitly to please deliver ammunition for the German Leopard tanks. Lula da Silva said he won't do that. He doesn't want to deliver ammunition for Ukraine and to see his weapons and his kind of military support. And that's where I would come back to your point, where I do see the Global South in a role in this conflict, but more in a solidarity supportive way and not military involved. And I think that is the role that also a lot of countries in Latin America want to have. On Ukraine. And on China, the influence of China, as you know, is enormous. It's huge. It started with trade, buying commodities from Latin America, and then it went into huge infrastructure projects. And I'm talking about, for example, the interoceanic road, right, connecting both oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean, crossing Latin America. But then also during the APEC summit that happened before the G20 summit, a very important port in Peru was inaugurated by Xi Jinping, who was there. And he was playing a key role while President Biden from the US was really in the second or even third row, similar to the family picture of the G20 where they forgot about Biden. I'm sorry, they did not forget, but
Biden forgot that there was a photograph being taken.
Biden was a bit slow to get to the family picture, so they had to take a second picture where he was also there. But you can clearly see that Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi are in the middle of this picture. So I think it's important to see this signs and to see how big the influence of China is becoming in Latin America. And what does that mean for the other BRICS, for the other countries besides China? I don't know. I would be interested also in knowing how interesting Latin America is for the other BRICS countries. But that is a question from my side, if I may.
Maria, you've been hosting these conversations now for many years, for the last 2 or 3 years. I've attended some of your conversations you've hosted in Berlin and other places. How do you see, over the last few years, this trend line that has seen some of the nations from the global south emerge and become more visible and influential actors in the global stage? A force for good, some may argue. A disruptive force, others may assess them as. What is your view as someone who heads this, big institution that engages with all sorts of voices and views?
Well, I don't head it, I help manage it. But other than that, thank you very much. And I think that, let me just add to what we've been hearing, one element, and that is the factor of what is legally binding and what is not legally binding. And in terms of the multilateral organizations, we do have to realize the fact that the one multilateral body or system that has a series of instruments that call for legally binding decisions is the UN. So in that sense, all of the other groupings that we have are extremely important, especially in bringing forth ideas, bringing forth alternatives, generating the momentum. And that is where, as I think we've all heard and we all agree, the global south today, or the south today, can play a particularly significant role and is playing a particularly significant role. But not only because it is generating ideas and alternative, but also because it is acting. As the speaker was saying, using the instruments, it is acting. And therefore the global south is already present, I think. That doesn't mean that the multilateral system doesn't need reform. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, let us bring forth those alternatives, and alternatives that, as President Mbeki very clearly shared this morning, and we have all heard, it's getting to the how. How do we achieve the aspirations of the Global South, which are aspirations that are shared by others, but not by everybody. So it's also a matter of building those consensus and achieving those, in order to achieve those goals. Now, if we look at what is going on in the multilateral system, and as Prime Minister Mata was saying earlier, for decades we have been speaking about reform of this system and reform of the UN, reform of the Security Council. But there are also a number of other processes where initiatives and alternatives can be brought forth. Many of them, or several of them, are going to be taking place in 2025 during the South African presidency of the G20, and it's important to bring them to this discussion, I think. One is the Financing for Development, the Financing for Development Conference, which is a UN conference, and I dare to say that it'll have summit dimensions and not just be another conference. And why is that important? Because a number of the challenges that we're facing require resources, financial resources. Mm-hmm. And if resources are going elsewhere because of the various conflicts in which the countries are engaged, and there is defense expenditure that's going up and military expenditures that are going up, and a number of others, where is the money going to be coming from?
Actually, on this point, and I want to come to the panel on this particular question, but let me ask you, Maria. When you are sitting in the global south in a developing country, it is astounding that when banks are in crisis, 2008-9, I'm going to that period now, you have leaders of the world, the G20 leaders, walk to the mic, I think at the London conference, and commit $5 to $6 trillion to save the banks. Somehow, the same political leaders who say, public finance is limited, are able to conjure up trillions of dollars to save the banks. Come now, flash forward 20 years later, or 17 years later, you have now a conflict happening. And the same countries that don't know how to produce public finance for development or public finance for climate are diverting $200-300 billion for fighting a war. The same countries who can't produce money to save the planet are fighting partisan wars for political purposes, to defend borders, to change borders, to reinforce borders. I'm not getting into the nature of the conflict. All I'm saying here is that public finance is available for certain tasks, is not available for the planet. How does that accusation and how does the direct accusation that Global South has indicted the North with and has led to the failure in trust shape the future of multilateralism? Maybe you can try this, and I will come to you, Minister Anand Sharma, for your views, and Prime Minister Musamara as well. And then I want to come to the speaker to think about these responses and reflect on it. So let me start with Maria, and then...
No, please. Minister, please. No, fine. Yeah.
Thank you. You see, one observation I want to make. Yes, there is talk in the world of G2, but it is an unreal world. G2 cannot be possible. The world is multipolar. You have different continents. You have nations who have aspirations, who have huge populations, especially the younger population. Take the case of Africa, some of the fastest growing economies. So what is important is that how we put our minds together when South Africa now has the G20 chair, to push forward the agenda which can uphold a democratic multilateral order, a rule-based order. It's moribund. There's paralysis. It is frozen because what has happened, the architects are not interested in reform unless and until we push for that. Because you cannot have in today's world a multilateral order frozen in 1945, when most of our countries were not free nations. Asia, Africa, and Latin America, countries which have today rightful aspirations to make their own contribution. About the transfer of resources, we have our own resources also, sharing of technologies. That should be more and more encouraged among the countries of the South-South cooperation. As President Mbeki had said, India has always been a votary of that, so has been Africa. And what we can do to address some of the challenges which are common across the world, but more pronounced in our regions. Take off hunger. 800 million people, that's also maybe not the right number. Close to 1/8 of the world's population of 8 billion. And the same thing, $1 a day, the UN mandated what is for sustenance. Is it adequate, even $1 or $2 for a human being to survive? World has enough food, but so many people going hungry to bed. That is an issue which needs urgent redressal. Also, how we have, without stability and peace, we cannot achieve these objectives. And what I have always said, countries with large populations, we have to harness the potential of the youth. If we do not, what we say is a demographic dividend will become a whirlwind. We have to provide opportunities. We have to give them access to resources, finance, as we are doing in India also and other countries. But together, the reshaping and rebalancing of the world order must remain a priority. It's not only the United Nations, because we hear the latest statement of reinvigorating the General Assembly. Same language is used in another paragraph, reinvigorating the Security Council. How? Unless and until it's expanded in both the categories, permanent and non-permanent, to bring in those who have been excluded for historical reasons. We cannot claim an international order as democratic and equitable if it excludes the entire continent of Africa. Of course, Africa will address that. The Common Africa position is there. That declaration is there. Excludes Latin America, excludes the largest democracy on the planet, India, and we say that this is the world order. So those things have to change, and same applies to the financial institutions, the Bretton Woods institutions. Unless and until that is done, and there has to be some sincerity and a sense of urgency, because G20 is a platform, how it came into being. I said so earlier, and how BRICS came into being, what were the compulsions? BRICS came because these are emerging economies which are contributing hugely to the global economy and the future. And the G20's birth took place because of the Asian financial crisis, and it registered, the penny dropped then, that the G7 alone cannot manage the global economic and financial governance. So now this is a challenge and an opportunity, how I view it, but we should be clear about our goals and which pathway will take us there to negotiate, to persuade. It's not a question of entering into a conflict. The other side is not going to disappear, but the BRICS Plus message from Kazan, reaffirming what the Johannesburg message was when South Africa hosted the earlier BRICS on the UN reforms, is very reassuring. And also BRICS Plus sends a message of the much needed check and balance in power, particularly questioning the West-led domination. So that is equally important. That has to be, it's not speaking against, entering into a conflict zone, it is saying what is correct, what is required, what must be done.
Prime Minister, can I turn to you?
I'm going to give you an example of what we see over the world, and taking the example from my area, West Africa. 2 years ago, our organization, ECOWAS, settled its own security strategy. We face a lot of security issues in West Africa, especially in Sahelian region, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. And this security strategy requires $1 billion a year. ECOWAS asked for this financing from African Union and for UN, and ECOWAS got nothing. $1 billion is what is done to Ukraine every single week. That shows how unequal is the world. And I think now we have a lot of exemplars of how unequal is the world. My concern is we should now stop complaining. And we should find some specific goals to achieve among us in the Global South that require more solidarity within Global South countries. And we are not talking about that. And how to strengthen the Global South in order to get the reform done in the UN system and the other system like a financing of the development. This is the main issue, I think, we have to put our attention on. Stop complaining, stop talking, try to get some specific goal everywhere in every issues, and put our strength together in order to get it. We have to be now more concrete, more precise.
Madam Speaker, may I request you to come?
Well, for me, as I said earlier, consistency is important to make sure that we continue to push for the reform of the multilateral institution. But also what other ways, other than the alternatives that I referred to, such as BRICS, IPSA, and other fora, but inclusion of society into engaging in those struggles, as we have learned in our experiences before, in my view, becomes important. I think beyond the think tanks, we also need to find a way how we mobilize the people of the South to actually push for these reforms, while at the same time look at alternatives where we can actually, have solidarity amongst each other. I would also say not disengaging the North. if you look at the issue of Gaza, how even within the Northern Hemisphere, ordinary citizens became a thorn to their governments
Correct.
in pushing them to take a particular stand, you know, to protect, to give humanitarian support, but also to stop sending ammunition. So I'm saying there's a multiple of strategies that we need to use, but also is to what extent we use our numbers to actually bring the pressure to bear.
So in fact, by the way, I think it's fantastic to use the power of communication and social media to reach out to constituencies around the world, to mobilize them, to pressurize their own governments, and to do to their governments what they did to our governments in the last century, to behave in certain ways. I think that's a very valid point. That why don't we use the power of amplification to in many ways now demand ethical action from those sitting in, and perhaps now define the liberal order for them. The liberal order question that we wanted to discuss in the beginning, we might really want to say that this is where liberalism is going to be defined and how it must be viewed and preserved and saved. You wanted to come in.
Yeah, I think that is precisely the example I was looking for the bridge that I was talking about. I think the Global South might be right now in a role where it can strengthen institutions that are already there, but at the same time filling in gaps like the one that you mentioned, bringing in communities that the Western countries would not be able to bring into the dialogue. So I think these are two very important aspects that I wanted to mention.
And the P20
The P20.
is a great forum to actually do this.
Actually, the P20 is a great opportunity to do that because it brings in the parliamentarians who are public representatives. And what role can the P20 also play in ensuring the mobilization of the communities in actually articulating what are the issues of the South, but also how do we put pressure on the parliamentarians in the North? Because if you look at Brazil, for instance, the P20 also brought in the Interparliamentary Union into the discourse, to not only talking amongst ourselves as members of the P20, but also to speak broader to other parliamentarians of the world about what are the important issues of the South.
There's an IMF estimate that 60% of global growth, and this is the point Prime Minister Musamara was making, that 60% of global growth comes from the developing and emerging economies, 60%. And it's likely to be a larger number in the coming decade. This trend line is moving north. And the point the Prime Minister made, and this is my final thoughts for all of you, the point Prime Minister made was that with so much resources now being generated in these dynamic economies of the South, is it time to architect, to move beyond solidarity and to architect institutions that allow exchange of technologies and innovations and even financial resources to serve the purpose of the South? So one big idea or two big ideas as parting thoughts from each one of you. What could the South do better to tap into the youth, the additional financial muscles, and the political mobilizations that today we have seen are possible courtesy our connected world? So just a couple of thoughts from each one of you as we close this.
You just
morning
speak
session.
about institution and strengthening them. I mean, today, here in Cape Town, who brought us together? ORF and the Thabo Mbeki Foundation. There are many think tanks who are here and individuals who can actually play a pivotal role in ensuring that we strengthen but also develop new institutions that can be able to drive the agenda. But for ORF and TMF to exist, you need to ensure that the capacity, not only internal to those organizations, but also the funding to make sure that they continue to do the work. And this is where moving beyond solidarity, in my view, also means. India has been known of exporting a lot of IT specialists. And we know how that has revolutionized India, but also the globe. And how can we actually utilize some of those expertise that we have in order to ensure that we resolve the questions of development that our countries face. Not only begging, as Prime Minister was saying, but actually doing something on our own.
On President Mbeki's very important point in the morning, President Mbeki, we promise you that as your team, we will put forward a draft for your consideration, a call for action from Cape Town for the G20 presidency of South Africa. We will make that happen. So that's a very valid point, and we should capture the conversations and make it into something that is digestible for our leaders. Minister Anand Sharma, let me turn to you now. One big idea or two big ideas as we close on how could South arrange themselves better, more effectively to tap into what they do possess?
Well, first, to speak in one voice with clarity. Second, prioritize what must be done. We have a long wish list, but not to get confused. Once we know that these are the goals, which are achievable together, sharing not only the developmental experiences, but the strength of our institutions in the field of healthcare, in technologies, in the digital world, like the speaker of a sister had said on India. Yes, we missed the first three industrial revolutions, but leapfrogged when we embrace the communication and information technology revolutions to be where we are as a global leader in this field and also in the digital field. But we took a decision long back in the New Delhi BRICS Summit. The Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh was there. President Mbeki would remember. That was to create an institutional mechanism of the central banks of the BRIC countries for lending and trading in using our currencies also, creating a pool, and a special dedicated financial institution was set up. That is there. Mm-hmm. How we ensure that it is strengthened further, and what we have as former Prime Minister was saying, that time now for us to walk the talk, how we can share our technologies, because without any interest, as we used to say, for our technologies, which we have developed of many of our countries, India also, are AAA. They are affordable, available, and accessible for the countries of the South. And that's what we should do, reducing our dependence, not reinventing the wheels, but our people have the capacity. And we are not, as I've mentioned earlier, we are not challenging anyone, we are only asking for equity and justice.
I'm seeing the time's up counter, but I want to have all three short interventions. Maria, outside in view or inside out view, whichever one you want to take. No. You can wear both hats.
No. Basically, I think it's trying to identify, put aside differences and try to identify those areas, those interests that there are in common. Be it in climate, be it in technology, as the Minister was saying. But the South has to talk to itself as well, and come forth with a voice as much as possible on the basis of those mutual interests.
Prime Minister?
In 1 minute, example from Africa. We have in Africa some big oil producers. Mm-hmm. At the same time, we have in Africa a lot of countries which are asking for oil, for their development, for power, for energy. How it is impossible in Africa to put our strength together on this way in order to share some part of this oil? Second is talking with the single voice about UN reform. Mm-hmm. Africa also is divided about it. Yes. We have to put our countries together on this issue and to have a same voice from Africa.
You want to come in?
I'm usually in your position, so I know you're under pressure, and I will elaborate on my answer. No, very short. I think it would be interesting to see more South-South cooperation. And the one voice thing, I would like to complement that. The Western countries are thinking more in nationalisms. So it would be very interesting to see the global South.
Think about internationalism.
Speak, exactly, and speaking with one voice. I mean, especially if you have a fractured second half of the world.
No, I think we've absolutely run out of time. We've had a fantastic conversation. You've set the stage for the next 2 days. And we have, in many ways, a consensus in the panel. Have a crisp agenda and a voice which is coherent and united, and coordinate and share amongst each other. I think that's the message from the stage. For South-led multilateralism, we need to do better than those who were in charge before us. So with that, please join me in applauding this panel for their wonderful views, and let me turn it over to Shobi.
Thank you so much to the panelists. If I could invite you to the top of the stage for a quick photograph. Ma'am, a photograph. We will now take a short break just to stretch our legs, get some fresh air, get a cup of coffee, and then come back in and we'll continue with the conversations. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you've had a wonderful morning. Thank you.